Welcome to the Feisworld Podcast, engaging conversations that cross the boundaries between business, art, and the digital world.
Hi everyone, you're listening to episode number 1 of the Feisworld Podcast. This is your host, Fei Wu. There are already so many podcasts out there. Why create one more? Well, I believe that brilliant people are around us, and they should share their unique experiences. So instead of seeking advice from only the top 1% of the world, this podcast is a platform where we can ignite unsung heroes and cherish their stories. I'm a senior digital producer at an advertising agency. I had the pleasure to work with a variety of clients including SAP, Fidelity, Talbots, Luxottica, Philips, IBM, American Eagle Outfitters. In and outside of work, I've been blessed to have encountered people I dreamed about interviewing. Our conversations are then made into these little podcast episodes I hope you all will enjoy. Let me give you an idea of a few people you will meet on this podcast. First off, Caleb Brown, whom you're going to hear from today. Caleb is a user experience designer, a comic book writer, and an incredible human being. Michael O'Malley, the first American Taekwondo practitioner to win the Pan Am Games, who is still teaching hundreds of students today, above and beyond just kicking and punching. Matt Lindley, an advertising executive who creates big ideas during the day for Fortune 100 clients, but he also helps house hundreds of homeless people every year and raising tens of millions of dollars to help struggling members of the community. Without further ado, today's very special guest is Caleb Brown. Caleb and I met at an ad agency in Boston. He was a senior user experience designer, and I had the pleasure to work with Caleb on a number of projects. Caleb simply lights up every room he walks in and inspires everyone around him. For example, he initiated a weekly meeting called Let's #WalkDoc. So here's what was in the meeting agenda I need to share with you. Let us not spend the day indoors. Does it sound familiar? Let us form a photo posse. Let us be a walk documentation insurgency. Let us try not to get hung up if it's rainy or if we get too busy. Let us invite others who might also enjoy the experience. Well, you get the idea. When I got impatient, frustrated, and needed a break, people at work will point me to Caleb. In addition to #WalkDoc, Caleb started another club called Vexillology. Let's just be honest, I had never heard of that word before. It's the study of flags, Caleb explained. People like Caleb are rare, which makes me even more eager to interview him. I hope you all enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Caleb. And, I feel like I don't have a set format for how I want to do this going forward. I do have a list of people I absolutely admire and still learn from every day, whether they're here, present in front of me, or have taught me very early on in my career. List of people, but you're the first person I decided to interview.
I'm completely honored.
Thank you, and apologize for moments that where I have to stutter on some words, and I'm not the best I could be just yet. But
oh my goodness, I'm not the best I could be just yet either, and isn't that the point? Aren't we going to be better and better and better as time goes on?
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
you're not allowed to apologize,
All
and
right.
me neither. No apologies.
No sorry.
Okay.
Not sorry. That's like the Pantene campaign that had 46 million views on YouTube. Pantene, sorry, not sorry, for women. That said, I would love to have you introduce yourself to my audience, our audience.
Okay.
About who you are. A couple of minutes if you want.
All right, and you can help shape this.
Love to.
My name is Caleb, and I'm a middle-aged person. I'm an American male. Sometimes I've been experimenting with calling myself a Middle-earth person instead of a middle-aged person because, I identify with that fantasy universe. Let's see, I'm an artist. I grew up in Boston, and I had a brief sojourn in Rhode Island for school, and I studied in Japan for a while. My wife and I lived in California and Montana. I feel like I had some really wonderful, substantial experiences out in the natural world in Montana especially, and I brought those back with me to this area. And my kids, we had twins, we brought those back with us from California. And I've always made things, made drawings, and I've always been really busy by myself. Like I had a childhood that was sometimes great and sometimes really painful. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I think about my childhood, I think about a lot of times in my room by myself, like inventing games or making stuff up or reading or building things. And so that continues to be how I engage with the world. So Fei, you and I met here at Arnold, and I feel like instantly, we recognize something in the other person, and something that we wanted to kind of like go deeper with, and look into together. Like, what is this thing? What's this spark that we share? And we went on some walks in the middle of the mall where Arnold used to be, and that's where our friendship started. And I remember walking around the Christian Science fountain and just talking about our lives and China and America, and of course you're a charter member of my vexillology club, so I feel very, very proud to talk to you today. I guess that's me. Like, I'm in the middle of a transition, myself from Arnold, and I'm interested to see like what's next, and to talk about some things that maybe are going to be consistent for me.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic intro. And I was going to dive right into sort of UX, user experience, and I think I'm going to change that course a little bit and talk about art for a moment.
Okay.
You mentioned that you are an artist. What type of artist? And perhaps we shouldn't sort of constrain ourselves into a single category. Mm-hmm. And people have such different lenses and look at fine artists, comic artists, and all these digital artists. Mm-hmm. Could you help the audience understand the artist you are?
I can try. In answering this question, of course, like I'm talking to myself too, because I spent a lot of time thinking about that, like what kind of artist am I anyway? A lot of times I think if you're a creative person, you face those demons inside you, that the voices that say that you're not good, or you don't have anything to say, or you're not an artist. But ignoring those voices, acknowledging them, but ignoring those voices for now. I guess I'll say that I think maybe my like core is drawing, and from there I've done a lot of printmaking, which the kind of printmaking that I've done, etching and also woodblock printing. The kind of prints that I've made tend to be very, like, they have a line element, and there's other graphic parts of those prints too, but mostly I think the line has been there. I've always done drawing, like on little pieces of paper and big pieces of paper, and on walls, and in sand. I spent a lot of time doing animations. When I was younger, I found my parents and I went to Europe and North Africa when I was 3, and I remember a lot of that trip. And when we came back, I discovered in some pouch or piece of luggage their Super 8mm camera that they had taken. They took movies. I have some movies from 1972 in front of the pyramids, and on Crete and other places in the Mediterranean. And I found that camera that they had used, and I started making animations with it, stop motion animations, with my cars. I've always loved Matchbox cars. I had cars, and so I just started experimenting. So drawing and also just experimenting with different media, like making things move, putting things in sequence, trying to create the illusion of motion or narrative. That started when I was like 7 or 8. And I continued to do filmmaking and animation through high school, and the last project I did was for a friend of mine that I went to college with, and I made a music video that was drawn. It was like a bunch of drawings. And then I used Keynote. I used like a presentation program to make the animation happen. And I'm not sure if it was if it worked, but I wanted something that was like fast and simple and could present things in sequence. So let's see. I've also done a lot of performance art and clowning and juggling. When I was younger, I did magic. I did birthday parties, and when I was in my early 20s, I did like science stunts around Boston. Now I tend to do much more. I've kind of circled back around to drawing, and that's really intrinsic to the user experience work I do, and also it's the core of my cartooning. So now my artwork is mostly about drawing, and like publishing, making little books, making stories. I think that's where I am now.
I'm a huge fan of your work, and knowing a lot about my background, my family as well.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very artistic family. Really looking back, my father's side and my mom's side of the family combined, I think we have, say, half of them are musicians, the other half are pretty much fine artists, and very privileged to be able to see some of the finest art produced by my parents as well as people they had exposure to. Many of them are no longer living. Many of them were their mentors. But still, I was stunned by your comics. And of course, I absolutely admire you as a person. You could argue that there's a personal connection. Maybe it isn't that great. I could just hear part of you kind of questioning that already.
Because we're friends, it's like maybe my comics stink, but we're friends, and so you're gonna like them.
I like it, and I encourage my audience to definitely check it out themselves. Even like in the middle of listening to this podcast, and can't really quite say that they have a personal connection to you. So correct me if I'm wrong. It's Caleb-Brown.
It's a hyphen. Yep.
Hyphen. Yes. Hyphen. Caleb-Brown.com. And I realize one of the reasons I like them so much is, I'm 31, and there are moments I try to remember about my childhood. And just like yours, there are many moments when I was a child I felt very lost. And my parents weren't around because I lived with my grandparents, who were very strict, between the age of 6 to 10. I think that's a critical age for many of us to be discovering about ourselves and who we are. And somehow, just by reading your comics, I noticed some of my childhood behaviors. Once I thought it was really weird. Things I imagined. I created a world, honestly a world. I talked to my stuffed animals. I was an only child, clearly you are too. And to create a world that I didn't think anybody else outside of the world would understand. Whether they could even be my age. My friends didn't quite get it. And I felt so close to your drawing. And in particular, and obviously this is a happy podcast, but like one of the ones for David, I'm not sure if I'm saying the title correctly, is very, very short. And I was very lucky to be able to read the online version and I'd be able to get the physical version, which I think you took some pictures of and how you folded so neatly. And that was so magical on so many levels and very, very sad as well. So with all that said, encourage people to experience that like themselves. But what are some of the moments that you inspired yourself to create such comics? And who do you think are sort of your mentors or your inspirations? How does that all come together?
Well, thanks for saying that about the comic, and thanks for being like open to somebody else's experience. My experience, like I just like you, when we make worlds for ourselves, I think we all like live in our own worlds, but clearly we share a larger world, and the challenge is to figure out like how can like my world be like penetrated by the outside world, and how can like things in my world come out and visit your world, and vice versa. David was like a really important friend of mine in Montana when we were living there, and I didn't know him for very long, but it was just like a really great friendship, and a lot of it was very like nothing. There wasn't anything. It was like special in its like unspecialness. It was just like a really nice adult friendship, and David committed suicide, and I remember hearing that and just being so like feeling the loss so keenly, and at the time I was working in Woburn, which is like a kind of a western suburb of Boston, and I was not feeling really plugged into the work very much, and I had this like habitual practice of like leaving work during lunch and taking a walk. I love to walk and just be outside. I don't like, I've discovered about myself, I don't like being indoors. I like to be outside. I like to feel the wind. I like to like feel connected to what's going on. And this was a place I was working in. There was like really interesting work and gifted people, but like, lots of fluorescent lights and cubicles, and it was hard for me. I felt very oppressed. I was outside. I learned about David, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to respond. I want to respond in some way to this event, from inside. Like, what? But how does one respond when a friend dies? I think like when you get older. When you're a child, like it's very difficult to make a response. There can be sad things in your life. Sorrow happens to everyone, right? I mean, loss happens to everyone. But I think that as you get older, you realize that you have to make space as a grown-up in your life, an imaginary space for responses to occur in. If you are so tightly bound, if you define yourself so narrowly, if you're so like wound up and small, then there's no way to respond. Things will happen to you. People will die. People will move away. Like things will end. I mean, eventually everything has to end, and it's very difficult. It's not something that any of us want to contemplate very much, but that's one of the like most essential dichotomies I think that we deal with as human beings. Like things come and they go, and like, can we change them? I mean, we can't necessarily change them, and it's very hard to accept that and to not feel like, oh great, well I throw up my hands and what's the point, Well, there is a point, I think. For me, the point is taking advantage of that moment and pivoting around it. My friend is dead, and he felt so like, he must have felt, can I even imagine how he felt? Like, let me try. What is it like to be like on the precipice of despair like that? I mean, I've been sad. I think we've all been sad, we've all been depressed, maybe. If we're lucky. Actually, I mean, I think you'd be unlucky if you were never sad, but like, because it's important. It's an important part of human experience, right? But for me, I was like, I thought to myself, and I was happy to be outside. Like, David loved trees. He was a forester. He was an arborist. Like, he knew a lot about the natural world, and I was like, I want to make a response to his life. And I immediately thought about like how I could fold it up. And I wanted people to discover, just like you were describing, my remembrance of David. Like I can't put all of the essence of our friendship into a comic, but I could distill what some of the things that I felt when I was with him into this folded piece of paper. And so that was what I did that you saw on my website. When he died, I made a little painting. I had been taking a walk and doing little paintings, just of like, sometimes they were cars, because I'd go into the parking lot and there's cars. This is a funny car. This is a beautiful color for a car, or this is a nice tree. I painted a tree for David on that day. And then I carried with me the seed of an idea that I was going to make a comic at some point. So that was the genesis. Yeah. Thank you. So.
And I feel so lucky that you had, now we have the time for you to articulate sort of the birth of an artwork, because, not to derive the subject, but to me what's really interesting is the creation of a piece of work. I think oftentimes we're trained to go to the museums, whether the paintings are thousands of years old, 200-300 years old, and I often stand in front of the painting and ask myself and try to imagine the creation of that work. And unfortunately, hundreds of years ago, people didn't really have the luxury to say an artist's painting and somebody's painting the artist's painting. But I keep imagining that. I think it's a beautiful story, and it kind of carries on like his spirit. And I think that is a very natural reaction. With that said, I think, I feel like podcast, the reason for me to want to start this is it's a very personal approach. People do read, and I read books, and I love reading books, oftentimes less so on a digital device, and I love the feeling of flipping over the pages. But to actually hear from you, one of the truth about you, which is really magical, through your drawing or through sort of a personal connection to you, people at work tell me from every department, every domain, every age, men, women, and there's a magical moment that you're able to touch their hearts very easily, naturally, in the most authentic way. I mean, I'm trying to articulate this process without sounding completely cheesy, but to me that is it's believable because I actually experienced that firsthand as well. Is why do you think that is? I mean, this is I ask people, why do you think that is? And I speak with one of my personal interest areas to help junior people at an agency, at a company, to continue to grow. And one of the things I ask them to do is, when you're sitting in a meeting, when you're interacting with people at the company, look out for the people who inspire you the most and observe their behavior. Granted, you might never become them. You might never be able to kind of master their techniques. Your name has come up over and over again of how you can so easily, naturally sort of, manage, facilitate a workshop. And what is so special about you, Caleb? Tell us about it.
Well, I'm very flattered by your introduction of this question. I don't know what's special about me. I mean, I think everyone is equally special. This is it. There's never going to be another Fei, ever.
Thank you.
And you have an obligation, and I do too. All of us have an obligation to. I think this is just me talking. I think we have an obligation to tap into our isness, as much as we can. Who are we? What is going on right now? We're the only people who can be here right now. And we all come from the same place, we all come from, and I'll just briefly invoke Carl Sagan. For me, when I was a kid, all of this exploration, space exploration, the Voyager spacecraft and going to Saturn and seeing Jupiter and Jupiter's rings and the Great Red Spot for the first time, all of that sudden expansion of of what we could discover about our home solar system really blew me away. I was an adolescent when all of this was happening, and the very first space shuttle launch, and that really, really impressed me. So I really believe that we all come from the same matter, the same molecules, the same elements that were forged in stars, and that's the Carl Sagan part of this. But so I think that given that we're all made of the universe, how is the universe supposed to know itself? There's parts of the universe that can sense, that's us, and reflect, be self-reflective. There's other parts, as far as we know, that can't. We don't think meteorite is self-aware. Maybe they are. But I'm fairly sure that I'm self-aware, so I feel like it's our job to be as like self-aware as we can be, like in the moment, be present and pay attention. So I think like I try really hard in meetings to do those things. I mean, it's one of those things that is like really simple but very hard. For me, it's very hard. I mean, you say that it looks easy or it's like, effortless, but it's not. Like, it takes a lot of effort. And I've learned a great deal from people that I've watched. I think that's excellent advice, but don't watch people in a really cursory way. You don't have to stare either, but just like be completely there and like put the armor away. Like, don't be afraid to look foolish or comedic or silly. You're gonna be dressed down by life. Life is gonna kick you in the pants, and it doesn't matter how you perform when you're on top. Like, I think it matters like how you perform when things are going sideways, and what you present to the world during those times, and what you share of yourself to other people. Like, other people need us, especially when things are going south or when things are chaotic or out of control. I mean, I would argue that there are very few things we can control anyway, but one of the things that we're mostly in charge of is how we present ourselves, and we can choose to present like layers of blubber or armor or insulation. We can choose to like lean back and like step out of the limelight, or we can choose to like step in and say, listen, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm going to say next, but I'm committed to like this moment and being here. As an artist, like, I don't have that many tools, but as an artist I can draw, and I can encourage people to draw with me. And so that's really the starting point.
If I may interject.
Yeah, please.
So many ideas formed in my head, and only if I were a professional podcaster
Which you are. Come on, this is your podcasting right now.
Yeah, a new podcast is born. I must say that the drawing in itself is magical, but also sort of your interpersonal skills, and on top of that is just created a world of Caleb, but not just a world for you to play in, but I feel like you approach people with open arms, that everybody's invited. You create this sort of aura of like, almost feels like a safety net that doesn't matter what is going on, and as we all know that not just for agencies, but any company these days, they can be quite chaotic, for the most part. About drawing real quick is, for me, I think that moment really happened, not just with my artistic, background, but other people in the room who may or may not have half the family who are artists, is to watch you just draw with in this case, a marker of any color on a whiteboard. And I'm very naturally drawn to handsome writing, drawing of anyone. So I was absolutely amazed. But then the experience took me to a whole new level when you're trying to explain something to me one-on-one and you start drawing again. I felt very special that this person isn't just grabbing a mark and trying to demonstrate to 12 people, out of which 2 are president, SVPs, that, look, I can do something you can't. I never felt that way. And we had the drawing one-on-one. Not only the ideas are there conveyed to me so easily that you're helping me solve puzzles. And I consider myself a really good puzzle solver as a project manager. And I love problem solving. A new sort of vision. And I felt so spoiled, too, that somebody is drawing a cartoon, like a comic book, so naturally, not constrained by frames, that I was able to see through this problem through a different lens. And on top of that, you're drawing backward. You're facing me like this, and you put a piece of paper in front of me. I had always been amazed by people who could write backward. I think we've all seen those people, and I've never been able to do that. And yet again, somebody's drawing backward, and that I've never seen that, and I don't think I'll ever be able to see my career again.
Until you start doing it. I mean, that's the thing. Let's break it down, okay? Like, some things you can do because you practice doing them, right? You know this because of your martial arts practice. You know that, like, you when you started, you couldn't do anything, and now you can do a lot of things. And if you asked, I don't know how old you were when you started your practice, but like when you asked like 6-year-old Fei, like, can you imagine that at some point you're going to be doing this amazing like twirl in the air and kicking, and you would say like, are you crazy? Like, I can't do that. I could never do that. And those are damning words. So you can twirl around and kick, and you can write backwards and draw backwards. That is practice. Like that's it's not easy, but it comes in time.
I feel the responsibility to carry on your spirit, which in turn carry on my own spirit, and to be proud of it at Arnold.
Right.
To be able to draw, to be able to facilitate a meeting, and be very present. I think when you're present, I find it very irresistible to be present. Like,
well, and that's the point. Is and by the way, like you, then I feel lucky to have seen what you produced, the like drawing pictures that you made to describe to other people in our agency, like the thoughts you were having about structure. Like it was all there, like the beautiful writing, the different colors, the way that the information was organized. Like you showed me, you reflected back to me like the very same constituent parts that you and I had drawn together. Like, so that it was really nice to see that circle closed. But I think when you draw with people, like I also don't know, like I don't know how things are going to come out. Like it's risky for me. I don't always, and I worry all the time. Like, oh, is this going to look like what I want it to look like? I mean, I think every human being probably worries that what they're going to say isn't going to match what they're thinking, or what's in their mind, what the image in their mind isn't going to come out of their hand when they do drawing or painting, or they're at the keyboard. We all fear that it's not going to come out the way that like we can see it inside. But I think we have to challenge ourselves just to like get through that and watch it come out wrong, watch it come out wrong, watch it come out wrong, and then sometimes it comes out right. And right or wrong, it was worth having it come out because you invite other people to be there with you. So like it's not everything that I do in a meeting is on purpose. Like from the way that I start to write when other people are talking, to show them that like, no, Fei, like these are your words, and like they're powerful and they're important. If you're the boss or if you're kind of just starting out, it doesn't matter. Like you said these things, and I want to honor the fact that you let these ideas out into the space between us in this meeting. Or like if you're talking about a structure or a relationship, if you're trying to like portray parts, or like talk about holism or talk about process, like I want to be able to like get that down and show it back to you, and then validate like, Fei, is it something like this, or is this the right metaphor, or would you make this like circle be in a different area? Like what is the flow? Like does it start here, does it end there? Like suddenly you have something to talk about, and then you show other people that they can pick up a marker too. I always try, and like this is an area where I'm still working. Like some of it is performance, but there's a moment where like you have to then like give the marker to another person. In a context, a business context, the person who's standing and the person who's writing is in control of the room. So I know that, and I try to like sometimes I try to like establish a vibe, and then I want to relinquish that. Sometimes to the person who hasn't said anything, I want to say like the stove is now ready for you to cook something, So and then I very intentionally sit down or like go away, so that it's their turn. And like you show people that they can do it. So those things, like some of that is just instinct, but like I just practice it every day. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's not magic, but it is fun, and I do like the invitation part. I like the invocation part. I like saying this is like a sacred, it's not, how people sometimes come into a meeting and they're like, oh, another meeting, like I can't believe we're at this meeting again. I hate meetings, like it's gonna stink. But you could try to turn that around. I think to myself, like, you know what, like my secret mission is to make this really fun. Like I don't want to be here either, so what can we do together that's going to be fun?
Yeah, absolutely. It just, I feel like there's so many names and books are just kind of ringing in my mind of the theme you're painting. And what's really unique is I feel like your voice, your stories is going to resonate so well with so many people in the world, because I feel like in sort of in the day and age is people are looking for certain books, certain figures, certain portraits to kind of say, okay, let me follow their footsteps because they are, they made $50 million last year, or things around sort of a figure, sort of self-worth, confusing self-worth with net worth, and cannot identify. But I feel like I have never quite learned as much, from a particular public figure or book compared to what I've learned from you in a very short period of time. And I've only been an artist for 10 months. I've known you for 10 months. We don't work on all the projects together. What I've learned is just now, and over the course, of course, is effort over attributes, and I didn't create that term. Josh Waitzkin, who is the genius, I shouldn't even use that word, but really the genius chess player, who's only in his 30s now, 36, 37. He was the first American to win at the national level since he was 6, 7, 8 years old. Was a public figure. And he wrote the book The Art of Learning, which I talked about very briefly. But even for someone like him, he said, it's not about emphasizing. I was born to be a chess player.
Right.
And he really worked very hard. And I'm sure many people look at your drawing and be like, wow, that is experience. That is talent. Of course they are. But that doesn't mean that you can start doing. And that's why I started using, this is my first podcast. And I'm so motivated to do more and more of this. And I want it to be part 2, part 3, part 100 with you to continue following your journey, your passion. And perhaps what I'm building, not just a starting point, but also for people to see the process of your life. And I feel like you're timeless. You as a person, as an idea, as an inspiration is timeless. And I can imagine myself in my 40s, 50s, 60s, and when I have grandkids, I really want to be able to go back to some of these audios and hopefully videos at some point to really kind of re-engage, because we all feel like we know. Like I talked to my mom, she's like, I never read any of these, Tony Robbins books or like self-help and, things that are along. She's like, I already know everything. And I'm so encouraged to tell my mom, no, you don't. You see how you behaved to certain situations this morning, last week? We all need to be reminded. So thank you for starting answering some of the questions that I was so eager to ask up front. So the last 10 minutes,
Okay.
I want to focus on the fact that UX, user experience, is such an interesting domain. And there's a lot of preconceptions, misconceptions associated with this domain. And perhaps you could give the audience sort of your take on what this field is, and because your vision is very broad, so instead of very narrow, like this wireframes, that's it, right? You go above and beyond.
I think it's great that it took us this long to get here. I guess I've always been somebody who I've never been comfortable with names and titles, and I don't even really know what to call myself. But I think, again, very broadly, user experience is about connecting the dots and linking people together, making things accessible to people, making things, and by thing, I mean any kind of interface. Anytime there's a person and something else, could be another person, could be a piece of physical infrastructure like a building or a door, a stairway, or it could be digital. It could be something kind of amorphous like healthcare. It could be the aging process. It could be a pedagogy. It could be elementary age education in America. It could be a paperclip, So there's multiple interfaces that exist between people and their world. So I think user experience is there, and a lot of people do user experience. I don't think that it's something that a single person is in charge of or knows about so much as it's a team goal or a cultural goal. It's kind of like something that's it's an evanescence, like the sparkle. It's like the carbonation that makes something more lively, or more vibrant, or more enjoyable. I started in the early 90s just playing around with HTML. And so for me, like, the way in was language, like a computer language based on standard generalized markup language. And I've always been like a wordy person, so there was a lot to like about writing code. But the thing that really intrigued me was the way that you really were in charge of the whole thing. When you were writing for the web, when you're writing web pages, when you're doing that by hand, and that's just how I happened to start. Like, I got some books out and I just started fooling around. That's really how things begin. I just start fooling around. I just get in there and I start digging around. And made a lot of bad things and things that didn't work, and most things I made didn't work or looked to me like bad, unappealing. So they didn't function, but that's how I learned. So that's how I started with user experience, and that term didn't exist. I grew into the job title of information architecture, as sort of a mid-career person in the early 2000s. I mean, I had been like a web designer through 2000, and then everything kind of fell apart, and it's a great moment to reassemble when things have fallen apart. So I think information technology, or the American digital e-commerce scene, we were all kind of figuring out how to fall back together at the same time, and I began to think of myself as an information architect at that time, and that's probably the industry term that is closest to where I come from. And that is kind of thinking really hard about the design of information spaces, and it could be like a map, or it could be street signs, or it could be a website or some sort of digital product. I think here in an agency context, that means that sometimes you're working on ads. How does this advertisement that occurs online or on somebody's smartphone, how does it present itself? How does a person who's looking at it, what do they do next? Who are they? That's a big part of what we do. Who is the person that is looking at this thing? And what is it that they want, and how are their wants and needs? How is their need condition balanced against what a business wants? And I don't think we're very staunch advocates, but we're sort of like Switzerland in that we neither are biased toward users exclusively nor toward business goals. We try to give everybody what they need and a little bit of what they would like. So we want to make sure that environments are not dangerous. It's like baby proofing, we want to make sure that this house is not going to hurt someone. So what's that thing that they say about in football, we're going to protect this house or something? It's that idea that we're going to make sure that you're okay. Are you okay? So I think what I like to do most is to think about with people, and you and I have done a lot of this. What is the point? What are we what is the very if you peel away all the layers of what this thing is going to look like or function like, what's the what is the very central idea, and how would you say it? Like if you were going to tell somebody, how would you say it in just a few words? This is a tool that people use to compare shoes, or this is a room that doctors and patients meet in to make patients better. Or I don't know. I mean, I'm making these things up. This is a machine. I need a machine that people ride that like goes from one city to another city. It can cross like thousands of miles. What does that machine have to have? Like, is it a rocket? Is it an airplane? Is it a balloon? Like, well, who's flying it, and who are the passengers, and when is it traveling, and how fast does it have to go? Like, what does it run on? I like all those questions, and like talking. I don't have the answers to any of those. Like, I think we are expert at looking elsewhere for answers, and then being kind of the conduit between people who have the answers and people who need the answers. So, and then I think the result is an interface that other people can use. Often we don't design for ourselves. We never really design for ourselves, and we rarely design for our business partners. Mostly we design for the customers of our business partners, and we are very rarely those people. So we have to find out like what are their needs and what are their desires, and how do we begin to encapsulate that? How do we demonstrate that quickly, and how do we correct?
It's absolutely fascinating, and I can imagine part 2 of the podcast will be
good.
about. Love the fact that you've already provided context to user experience as a domain, so much in addition to a standard job description. Audience who are, I guess, at a career switch to say, I want to consider this, or I'm just fresh out of school, I want to know what this is about. So they go to these company websites and be like, okay, wireframe, OmniGraffle, what is it really like? And now I feel like there's so much more context to it. And I would love to have a follow-up session on, sort of helping people identify if they have the right attributes to, or they're ready to commit the right effort into this domain. That would be really interesting. But at the same time, to kind of, part of that is self-selection. Part of that is, what if after a little while I am a UX designer, but I'm not sure if this is quite right for me anymore. And how do you really see that as well? And that could be very challenging to say maybe this isn't for me, things along that line. And to quickly wrap up this podcast, if I may give you just a couple of rapid fire questions.
Okay, no more compliments though.
No more compliments, and then this particular section, it will move along very quickly.
I'm ready.
Any questions that you're like, not so sure, we could just skip ahead.
Okay.
So, question number 1. Imagine you had a Kickstarter project, or if you're funded by MacArthur project, what would it be?
Well, I think it would be something about, I think I would want to use comics, or like the visual dimension of information in some way. I want to think about like a big project, a big like teaching project, teaching people to do something through some sort of like visual instructional, like, but interesting. I'm making it sound terrible, but like teaching like a wide audience something really simple. I would want a simple sort of like drawn thing that people could learn with.
Awesome. It reminded me of Khan Academy, but without too much commentary. What would you say to your 18 or 20-year-old self? That what would you have, not so much what would you have done differently, but...
I would just say relax.
Fantastic.
I'm still saying that to my 45-year-old self, and I'm not very good at it. That's really hard for me.
Interesting. What is your morning routine?
I love systems and I love routines, and usually, like I know it takes me like 45 minutes to get ready, and I pack my lunch in the morning. This is about work, like a work day. I pack my lunch, I take a shower sometimes. I get ready to go, I put all my things in my baggage, and then I commute. But I really like quiet time. I really like to be by myself in the morning. I will sometimes like meditate. I would like to like exercise, like run. Like I actually hate running. I hate it.
Me too.
But I do it, and I don't do it because, like, I actually think that you don't have to do things. You don't always have to be doing things you love. Like, I don't think you should punish yourself. Like, I don't do things that I've learned. I would also tell my 18-year-old self, like, to stop punishing himself. So I don't, like, running is tolerable, but I like what happens for me when I move. So that is why I run, and I like being outside. So those are two good things about running, and I would want that to be part of like an idealized morning routine.
One last
Coffee.
Yeah, coffee always. One last question.
Go.
What is that one thing or gadget or non-gadget that you can't live without?
I'm really, you know this about me probably, but like I'm not a very gadget-centric fellow. But I would say that I've loved, you know, an iPod, or actually, yeah, I always carried around like a Walkman or a tape player and headphones. Like I really, really enjoy like in your ear headphones, earbuds that like go in your ear. I like those. I like shutting off the world a little bit, like not to cancel the world out. I think noise canceling headphones, fascinating to me. Like I am going to cancel. I want to cancel the noise. Like I don't want to cancel the noise, but I do like to hear music. And for me, it's a lot of jazz. It's a lot of kind of like planetarium music, almost like hard, angular, ambient music sometimes. But I like to things without words. I love songs with words, but if I'm like working or thinking or doing artwork, the words are really distracting for me. So I'd like to have headphones. That I can live without anything, but but that would be the first thing. Like I'd want to have a lot of music, and I'd want to have some great headphones that go inside my ear, and
Awesome.
don't cancel things, but give me some great sound.
Very specific. Thank you so much. I have so many more questions, but that will have to be in part 2, and I look forward to doing this with you again.
Oh well, thank you, Fei.
Thank you, Caleb. I know you have to run to a meeting. I'll cut the rest out, but
Thank you.
that was so much fun.
Is this okay?
Yes, no, this is lovely. And
Is this what you wanted?
This is exactly what I wanted. I had more questions like your creative routine and kind of
Well,
get started.
ask those later.
Yeah, let's do that later. So we have even more questions. It would be really interesting, a dedicated session to help people get started in the field.
Yeah.
Because there's always this cloud that people can walk through, and the moment they go through, it's like, that's it. It wasn't that hard.
I know, and I feel like if we could almost say like the goal of this podcast is to help you feel like you can and that you could do this if you wanted to.
Yeah. I love it. I feel like I'm going to start it's the start of my day. My day's going to be different. My week is going to be different.
No, me too. I feel it's been a great conversation. I feel like it's always nice to talk to you. It's really nice to be like so serious about it. Like, and thank you for doing that, for saying like, okay, this is like serious and it's worthy of me doing this podcast project, and let's get together and talk and not have it just be like a conversation, in between place A and place B. But let's make this real.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully it's a thing, and then you can check out other people I will be interviewing.
Oh, I want to.
I think that'll be really, really cool.
You're a great person.
Thank you, Caleb. You're very special, and I'm so glad you could move on to also influence other people.
I hope so. I hope they get influenced to be more themselves.
So.
I was thinking, do you know there's a website called The Great Discontent? And they do, it's not podcasts, I don't think, but it's like interviews with like designers, and it's like Q&A, and I wish that I could spend more time reading it, but there's some great like interviews, and
I will, yeah.
It's nice.
Awesome. If I may
Tell me what you think.
I will do that right away. I want to give something, if you don't know that already. Songza, Songza, Songza.
Oh, okay.
They used to be a paid music service, but not anymore, and they capture your mood and they have literally you go to the website.
And it's like it's mood. You choose mood, and they give you
Based on
music based
music.
on. Oh, I love that idea.
And no lyrics. Like
seriously?
Yeah, exactly. You are
do
you working in a
do
station?
you do that? Do you use it?
Of course, I use it every day.
You do?
Yeah, like lyrics, no lyrics. Hey, 90s, feel happy, bubbly music, or do you 2070s? I mean, it is. And also the best part is if it's a rainy day, it's like music for a rainy day. And then if it's Sunday afternoon, it's like, are you playing in a park? I'm like, oh my God, I'm playing in a park. And then I'm reading, are you playing in a park and reading a book? Yes, I am.
How does it know that?
Because some of that is generic, some of that is user experience, right? Like, what are the most common themes and activities on at 3 p.m. on a Saturday?
I love that.
Yeah, and of course they have iPhone app, Android app, and then also the internet browser experience.
All right, well, I'm going to download that.
Cool.
You're really a great person.
Thank you,
I
Caleb.
just
You're very
feel
special.
really lucky that we could work together.
Hey, it's Fei. I am back for a few words at the end of the show. I hope you enjoy what you heard. You can visit us online at feisworld.com or social channels such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, also under Feisworld, to keep things simple. I personally review and respond to all the messages. Love to hear from you. Thank you, and lots of hugs. See you next week.